Okay. Hi, guys. Chandler Mirabal. I am a game master. Sorry for the IT problems. Michelle, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you too. I was just kind of commenting on how I don't know how anyone has the patience to be a DM, so I'm impressed you
Well, I am actually more impressed with you and being able to tell stories the way you do. The fairy tales were great. That's kind of the inspiration for me becoming a game master.
do. That is awesome. So thank you for that. I
That's
actually kind of got kicked out of one of my own campaigns because I was a tank and I may have kept pulling damage on our healer. So you probably don't want players like me.
Well, there ain't no party like a D&D party because a D&D party don't stop until the healer's dead or you're out of healing potions.
That's true.
So, my main points to this is trying to get people more involved with descriptions, with telling the story, making it more lifelike almost, because you as a storyteller, you want to make people have that wonder, have that magic that you felt like when you were a kid, like you were saying. But it's different with an adult, and then different almost when you're killing goblins with a sword, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what you find magical as a child is completely different than what it is as an adult. And trying to find a way to activate that play is a lot different because your imagination, whenever you're adult, just isn't quite as active sometimes. So that's what's great about gaming is it's a completely different world. It's a completely different departure.
Right, and it's like I gave the example in a thing I recorded the other day, because I'm talking about modules and homebrew. With modules, it may be somebody else's content, but you can make it your own story. So it's like Jack and the Beanstalk or any of your fairy tales. They've been, they're from eons ago, but it's the way you tell them, right?
Always. And stories get retold over and over, and it's just about making it a little bit original, making it yours. So it may have similar elements, but if you have two different people telling the same story, they'll be completely different because you're going to get different people's perspective. So
Right.
it's always a different thing. And
So
your audience, you change it too.
right. I do have a question for you, and it pertains to all this. When say you're doing a module like Tyranny of Dragons or anything like that, or any Dungeons and Dragons module, that's the best example I can come up with. What little pieces do you do to make your players a little more involved or sunken into the world? I know I do different things like accents. I got a severe stutter, so that's how I counteract that. For some reason, all my elves in my world are Irish, so I put on the Irish accent, or I put on whatever. So how do you do that?
Well, I wasn't the master in mine, but we had a really good one. But what we did was we actually all had to write backstories for our characters. But what happened was we didn't know each other's backstories. Only the DM knew the backstories and the character themselves. And we would choose to share what we wanted to, but having a backstory actually helped out quite a bit. But also, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as instead of just rushing through the game, taking time for those interactions. Don't encourage just the hack and slash, really play up the story portion, because if you're fighting constantly, you're missing out on information, you're missing out on opportunities, and that's a huge part.
Right. See, the example that I always come up with is I have this. Well, they always said don't play with your own toys, right? But I have a character in my own homebrew setting. His name is Arcadius. He's the omni-powerful wizard character, and he owns a magic shop. And I was running a game one time, and I had a million different things on my mind, and for some reason I said, hey, it's the exact same guy in the exact same magic shop in a totally different town. So we took a break, and my players were like, we know you this would bug you, so how are you going to unvideo game this video game of a character you just made? Okay. Well, then I had to come up with reasons on why he was there, why this, that, and the other. Eventually, Arcadius Meadowmere became a quite unique and essential character to my world of Stedengale. Um, so it's one of those things you have to describe every little detail of his magic shop. I have everything from basilisk testicles to purple worm stomach acid.
I'm very curious how you got those testicles, but
You don't want to know.
having those accents really helps draw people in, and that detail is what helps them have that departure. Because if you ever notice whenever someone's telling a story, you can't help but start to imagine it in your head. So the more
Exactly.
you are, the better it's going to be for the players.
Right. I had uploaded something or had recorded something a few days ago, and I had brought up the thing of so you walk into a bar or you walk into a tavern, and I say, well, this is what you have going on. You have patrons, you have barmaids, you have the innkeep, and you have a fire. What you doing? Okay. With that, this is a little fun thing I get to do. How would you make that a little more storytelling-esque? And after that, I'll do mine and see how they differ.
Well, first of all, I would start by describing the scents and the smells of things. The reason why smells are so important whenever you're telling stories like that is because smells are very closely attached to memory.
Right.
So if you're describing the scents they have, describe the popping of the fire, the crackling of the wood. Describe the people and some of the conversations you're hearing in the background. So I would just kind of take an entire story going with that. And I would start describing like how people are looking at them. Are they even looking at them? Or are they dismissing them? And just make it like the introduction to a story. So I kind of think of them like cutscenes in a game, because you want to have all that detail, and there's always going to be the people who want to just click through it and have no idea what's going on.
Right.
But getting very descriptive, and I'm going to let you tell how you did that, because I think your description on that would be really cool. I don't want to steal from the story side of that.
Oh, but no, this is exactly why I wanted you here. See with me, I do a lot of this go along with the same lines you do. I am very descriptive. Of course, I read god awful everything. Even especially Stephen King, to where he's very descriptive. So that's kind of where I learn to do that. But especially in the games, if I'm describing the tavern, most times I go into it like, as you walk into the tavern of this seemingly upkept building, you push open the heavy wooden door at the entrance, and you can tell it's been replaced a time or two. As you cross the threshold, the wafting, overpowering smell of stale beer and liquor tingles your nostrils as you scan the room. You see 4 men in the left corner drinking, celebrating something that's happening with one of them. In the other corner, you see a patron trying to take a barmaid home, and she's not having any of it. The guy in the back of the room, he is got 10 tankards in front of him and is working on his 11th. The fire is nice and warm. You smell meat that has been cooking all day long, coming from the kitchen somewhere in the back. And at the bar, which is a solid piece of mahogany, the problem is that it's a little too big to be just one solid piece, as you perceive. You walk up to him and you find out he is a 5'10" high elf with bronze skin, gold eyes, and he looks at you and says, good day to you. I see you're new here in town. As he's wiping his tankard with the bottom of his apron. So, are you looking for food? Are you looking for an ale? Maybe some work? I do have some interesting work for you if you're into the unscrupulous side. That's what I say. Now, what you guys doing?
That's really cool, because you're opening it up, but you're giving them several things they can pursue. They can pursue, of course, the person in front of them. They can look at what's going on with the tavern wench in the background. I mean, they can really go anyway. Most people are going to choose to stick with the character in front of them.
Right.
But the fun part is that they can really deviate if they want to. That's the brilliance of it. But
Right. And see, kind of the way came up with that thing is my players like to give me a left field, off the wall something. So I'll give them 5 or 6 different scenarios that they can follow, and 9 times out of 10 they'll just revolve right back to 2 or 3.
well, something else you might even add in there is kind of the Gaiman effect. Do you read a lot of Neil Gaiman?
I have, but not recently.
My
More the
favorite,
Sandman comics than anything.
oh, his stuff is brilliant, but my favorite thing by him is just the short children's book called Instructions. And if you're ever needing just a quick, relaxing read, it's brilliant. But there's a lot of the things that he has in there element wise that I try to incorporate in stories whenever I'm telling them a lot more in person because it's a lot easier that way. But
Mhm,
something he says is like, look at the door you've never noticed before.
mhm.
And he makes you take some confidence with that. And then something he says as well in that story is, you can turn back now, you'll be safe. You won't lose any face. But if you continue on, so he's giving people options and he's
Mm.
giving them some emotions with that as well. So
Okay.
with not going to lose any face, having that emotional portion there is too. Now, different people are going to interpret things differently, but you're going to know the characters that are playing pretty well. I
Okay.
mean, I know when I was a tank, I was pretty much just standard tank.
You're like, I cast sword.
Yeah, I was a very religious tank, so I lived pretty well. My healer was kind of useless. That's why I kept rolling damage on him. He wanted to fight. He was a jerk.
I mean, if you want to be a war cleric and you're only just a friar, yeah, you might want to do a little reevaluation.
In my defense, others started rolling damage on him after I set a precedent. But there's several story options, which is brilliant because you have kind of like in gaming, like video gaming, you have the main quest, but you also have side quest options.
Right.
So something I'm curious with is, what do you do whenever you're telling this and you have one of your characters who just answers with something completely off the wall or has something you haven't anticipated or planned for?
I actually have a player who is exactly who you're talking about. I love him to death. He is one of my very good friends, but he has done crazy shenanigans. The way I handle it is I normally, well, I know the rules of the systems, which I run in 5th right now. So doing that, the DMG Dungeon Master's Guide, know your basic rules, but there's always a way to do something. He's like, so I want to do a Dragon Ball Z, and I want to run, jump, and punch the dragon in the side of the face, and try not to die as I come down and do a superhero landing. Like,
That's all different roles.
I was like, okay, give me a second, let me think about this. So it's one of those, I call them DM breaks, to where you take your DMG in the bathroom and pretend you're going to the bathroom and just actually like looking through the book real fast. You know what I mean? So I told him, okay, this is what I would do if I were you. 1, you're gonna have to have some way to boost yourself up that high. 2, you're gonna have to have the strength to even do any sort of damage, to even touch the dragon. You have to have somebody put a spell on you, drink a potion, something. Then I want you to make a jump check, an attack roll, a dex or a dex save, and a constitution save as you run, jump, hit, attack. Try to make it to where you're going to stick it on your feet, and then see if you have the constitution to actually survive.
Okay. So you're making it kind of step by step, but you're still giving them the options of doing those things.
Right. I mean, there are very few things that you really can't do in the games. Now, of course, that's up to every game master's discretion because you are God in that world.
Well, and that's something that how the DM reacts to those things, because you're always going to have players like that, is going to
Right.
make a huge difference. And not just in that system. I mean, there's so many different gaming ones you can do. I've seen Alien and Predator game-based systems, kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
Dragons. I know that Labyrinth from I think it's River Horse just released an adventure game.
Hmm.
So there's all these different sets, but you're always going to have people who come up with things that are different. But that's where it's fun for you as the storyteller in that to help guide it along. Plus, depending on the roles, I mean, he might just gently caress the dragon before it eats him. I mean, depending on how he does it.
Right, right. And you know, I've run different things in different systems to where I haven't, but there things have completely caught me off guard. Vampire the Masquerade. There are some things that people do and you're like, "Oh, this just turned into some soap opera stuff." All right, guys. Or Dread. I love running Dread. And if you've never played and you like any kind of horror anything, Dread is a game of horror and hope that instead of rolling dice for your actions, you pull from a Jenga tower, and if the tower topples, then your character dies. You know,
Oh, great.
it's actually really great. That's a very basic description of it. But me running the game, I'm the narrator or the storyteller of, you know, this horror story, and my players, they're the ones doing the actions, they're the ones making the movie. I'm just telling them the reactions of what happens. Okay. There's been times to where they're like, I'm going to stand in front of the monster and I'm going to confront it and I'm going to point in its face and just yell at it. You're not going to run? Nope. Are you
They
sure?
never played Doom, did they?
Huh?
They never played Doom, did they?
See, that's the problem. Just people like us, we understand. You know, 12th level Doom, you're just like, no, don't talk to the monster. The monster's the thing that's going to rip your head off.
You see, all that's fun because it's all interactive. But the thing with anyone who's playing those games is they have to realize that they're leading the story, but they don't control it,
Yes.
which is hard for a lot of people. But if anyone's looking at kind of a brilliant example of storytelling, they just want to be immersed in stories. There was this TV show from Jim Henson. It was The Storyteller. You can find it on Amazon. You can purchase the entire thing. That is my absolute favorite stories ever told. I don't know how many times I've rewatched it because it's so immersive in the way they tell the stories, and that gives you a great foundation for how to do that. But something that's kind of interesting while you watch that is there's other characters who kind of chime in and talk during the stories that he addresses, and it changes, which is, I think, part of it. You have to be very limber to be a storyteller. You have to be able to jump a lot.
Right. And see, as we were talking about the mechanics side, the other side, the storytelling side, that is the big portion of that is that you kind of have to just know everything about what you're telling, because if you don't know, then you're kind of just, it's kind of like saying how, okay, I'm trying to think of the best example I can go up with this. It's trying to like tell somebody about Japan and you've never been to Japan, you know.
Well, and I kind of think about telling a story a little bit like being in love, which is very cliche. I know, very girly of me to say.
I've never heard that put that way.
Well, the reason for it is think about whenever you're having those feelings, the heart palpitations, all those feelings that you have, but you suddenly are remembering every single detail about that person. You know, the color of their eyes, you remember the way that their voice lilts a little bit, you remember how they smirk a little bit whenever they said something. I think of it like being in love because you're paying attention to those details without even trying.
You know, that's a really, really good way to put it. I've never heard it put that way, but I'm going to yoink that. I'm just gonna, you know. Yeah, I completely agree with that, especially for, you know, homebrew and world builders, period. If you're going to start, you know, world building anything, to tell your stories, you have to know what's going on. Think of an example, Tolkien, okay? Granddaddy of, you know, fantasy. He knew what was going on in his world at any time, at any moment, just because he pretty much lived in two different realities. He could tell you what, you know, the great outstanding tree of Fangorn that is on the very edge and nobody knows about it. He could tell you what that would, you know, what that would look like. We can only hope to imagine what it would look like, but hearing his notes and hearing the book, or reading the books and listening to all the stories, we can somewhat get a glimpse of the pure joy and emotions you're talking about that he felt as he's writing that.
And his writing was brilliant. I mean, The Hobbit is one of my favorite books. One thing that also comes with this is don't be afraid to take notes. Remember those side characters that you brought up, write them down, write down their little mannerisms so you can bring them back later, because that's going to help you do that. Because even though he was a brilliant author, he was keeping notes so he could keep everything straight. Because otherwise, you can end up having things that are jumping, and the person may have an Irish accent one day and an Australian accent the next. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to kind of say, okay, this person's here and this person's here. Well, this person's here. Okay, maybe I know exactly what we're doing. No, you really don't. And you still don't know what you're doing. And there are sometimes that even Tolkien himself has, say, let's go back and rewrite that. Don't be afraid to, take a step back and say, you know what, that was a dungeon master mistake. Sorry, here we go with the new continuity, because I know that I've had to do it. Everybody else has had to do it. The point of that being is just don't be afraid.
Well, and your players are going to respond really well to that, because one of the biggest downfalls with D&D, at least from the campaigns I've taken part in, is people get bored, so they stop showing up. You need something intriguing so people have that buy-in, and they're going to be like, no, I'm going to put this off because I really want to go game time. This is what I need to do. But the reason why people start gaming is they do want an escape. They want an adventure. They want fun. And if you can deliver that as the person who's telling the story, as the DM, you're going to have people who keep coming back.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, there's so much that you can do with that, but if you don't have their buy-in, and kind of the number one key is if you're too stressed to have fun, you're not telling the story right.
Exactly. That's why it's a really good thing for, dungeon masters to take a break. If you've been running for 6 months, once a week, 6 months straight, even more than that, step back, take a break. It's okay. Come back to reality a little bit. You're getting too much of God complex. It's fine.
Well,
Not like I've had that speech before.
Oh, probably. I mean, we've all had things like that whenever we're telling any kind of story.
Right.
I mean, there was one point where I was teaching a class on storytelling, and I was a little bit overwhelmed because I was trying to figure out all the different story elements. I even ended up using tabloids as an example of storytelling, which it is.
Okay.
My students actually laughed about that. I had to try to explain to the university why I was using the class funding for that, but it was justified.
That is a really interesting way or thing to have to justify, I guess.
It was, but they paid for it and the students loved it. But I had to start looking for other ways to look at storytelling than how I typically did, to try to keep myself engaged as well as the students.
Right. And see, that is kind of hard that I've noticed for certain dungeon masters anyway, is trying to keep, especially in like a homebrew setting, or well, even a module, you can get bored with it, is the dungeon master getting bored himself, just saying, oh my god, okay, they've been in this dungeon for literally 3 ongoing sessions, and I know for a fact that there's nothing else in here, but they're going to crawl and go through every single door. Now, that, yes, it is a little, redundant and prolonged, but in my opinion, I still think you could do a whole lot with that and give them like the next campaign afterwards. I mean, so you go into one of these rooms and you see this sword, and in your mind it's the sword of cost, or I don't know, but it's that's the way I would do it. I don't know about you.
Well, I would say also don't be afraid to throw in elements you hadn't originally planned to. If you know there's nothing else in that dungeon, but they're not leaving, why not add something? Why not have a chamber that leads to the next place? You can kind of force the story along as long as you do it in a natural way. But
Right.
don't be so married to the story that you originally wrote that you're not going to be flexible with it.
Right, exactly. That's perfect way to explain that. And even with going into more of a supplement, you a lot of people get hung up on, like, oh, I gotta make sure I hit these points. I gotta hit this. I gotta hit this and hit this. Well, okay, there's the end of the story. I don't know what else to do. Well, being flexible is the best thing you can do. If I were to tell you that, okay, well, that's the end of your adventure. You ended up at a tavern. Got nothing else for you. But what do you guys want to do now? With the whole tavern example, what would be your first thought if I just said, or what would be your first question about that scenario if I said, okay, we're done? Wouldn't you have more, you know?
Well, first of all, I'm going to feel cheated as a player because there's still more that I want to do. But also, it's not a very clean exit. It's almost like jumping from one cutscene to another with none of the things in between. It makes no sense. So, kind of an easier way to do that if you're done with it and you want to force the exit is force an event that makes the exit happen, but make it something that is linear, something that's connected. And something else you can do too is, let's say you really want to get them to that tavern, have them find something in the dungeon that's going to lead them back to that, to make them want to go. But the thing is, you can't make the players do something without giving them some reason to have that drive. What's their motivation? I mean, that thing you hear actors say, what's my motivation? Well, players need that too.
Right, and I'm glad you bring that up, because that was kind of along the lines I was hoping you would bite onto that bait with. Is that it's more of you don't have to have a cataclysmic event to hurry something up, but you can have something like, say your next villain comes up and locks you guys in prison, or locks the party in prison. That's a good way to end it. But with the storytelling elements, you have to actually embellish on that. Now, if you will, for me, so we're gonna take that tavern scene. We're gonna take we're gonna finish it, and the next villain comes up, but we're gonna take a break from this game for a good 3 months. That way, I can write more. I'm really interested to hear how you would wrap that up.
As far as like how I would get them to engage later on.
Like, more of, instead of just saying, okay, well, your villain walks in, we're done, guys. How would you, as a storyteller, how would you embellish on that? And we'll just say, we'll take it from where the elf was saying, so I can give you some unscrupulous work, if you don't mind. So from that point on, how would you?
Something that I would probably do is, let's say that it's the point where I really want to take a break from the game to be able to design the next element, is I would probably go the mini challenge route. And this is where my geekdom comes in, because I like games with a lot of mini challenges. That's
You let your geek flag fly, sweetie.
Well, with this, what I would probably do is kind of have the introduction and give a little bit of information about the next villain, but I wouldn't actually have the next villain make an appearance. I would make them curious about it. And then I would probably have some remote play for a while, where we would just do 10 to 15 on the phone or via Skype, or however you want to do it. I know that right now this Zoom is the big thing, but that way I still get to have my time to be able to build it up. But that gives me like a week in between to come up with a short mini challenge. So that would be where we'd be doing some of that unscrupulous work. Not very long, just mini sessions, to where they'd be learning a little bit more about the villain each time, because that gives me time to come up with the lore of the story that we're going to do, but it also helps you ensure that the characters are buying in, so that whenever you're ready for that next 3 months, they have just enough information to have a taste of it to where they want to come in. Okay. So kind of like a teaser trailer, but it's something where it has to be interactive, otherwise it's not going to work, because then they'll forget about the story, they'll not care anymore.
Right. So let's say that we do have the next villain all set up. He's, I don't know, the governor of the state you're in, or whatever. Huh?
He's Negan, sorry.
I mean, yeah, just after Glenn. We're not gonna get into that. Just no. Um, so you have the next villain. You have your side quests. My whole thing is you have that main campaign session. You have to have your what's it called, the epilogue. You have to have your epilogue.
Okay, epilogue.
Okay. I know how I would do it, but no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna make you do it. No, you give me an epilogue. I want you to give me an epilogue.
You want me to tell the story of how I'm going to be having this? Okay. Well, I'm not sure if it's going to match up quite with your story.
That's perfectly fine. Just that's kind of that's the point. Is that two different storytellers trying to work on the same instance and see how it's different.
Okay. So I would say something along the lines of, the more you listen to the tavern owner, the more you realize that there's more truth in each one of his lies than there are lies in his truths. Everything is woven together, but you're not sure how to pick it apart. For the next 3 months, your quest is to follow what he says, but to find the glimmers of truth and the glimmers of darkness in each one of them. But the more of those you piece together, the more you're going to find about our villain. What is it? Who is it? Where is it? With this, as you go through, we're going to figure out, sorry, I'm trying to do this.
You're perfectly fine.
I haven't done this part in a while because I haven't done that kind of storytelling. I usually have a very clear objective. But whenever you find the lies, whenever you find the truth, and you fully piece them apart and you put the shards together, you'll have the complete of each. And from those two separate spheres, you'll be able to hold them together, look through, and see the light of the next story. Something like that. I don't know. Sorry, I went a little bit dark crystal there.
No, that is perfectly fine. Like that's exactly what, the point I'm trying to make here is that you can tell it one way. I can tell you right now, I would have taken a completely different route with it, but I loved the way you described it. It was perfect. I couldn't have described it that way better, I guess you'd say.
But your version would have been very different. So what would yours been?
Mine would have been like, so as you're talking to the tavern owner, you get this sense in the back of your mind like somebody's watching you. You peek over your shoulder, and from the window of the tavern, you see a hooded figure looking in, and you know the eyes are glaring straight at you because they're shining a bright, almost lavender. Darts from the window and goes what you assume to be around the corner of the building. If you were to follow him, you run out the door, look, nobody's there. You go back in the tavern, and you go to talk to the tavern owner, but the problem is, he's not there. In fact, nobody's there. The tavern is completely empty when just seconds ago it was full. You see this hooded figure come out from the doorway and saying, "Well, I think you're the perfect person for the job I need done. And the unscrupulous work, yeah, that's what he was talking about. I just get more of an inclining for people than he does. So, my question to you, how dirty are your hands willing to become?" But that is a tale for another time.
I like it.
Right. It's more that you don't. It's those characters that you don't know if they're going to be the villain or they're going to be the hero.
Well, and the interesting part about asking if they're willing to get their hands dirty is getting your hands dirty isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes you're doing bad things for the right reasons in these games.
Lawful good does not mean lawful nice.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah, thank you, because that's a kind of the contrast that I was looking for, to where you have more of a I guess more of the spark of adventure type thing, and me, I was more of the, well, I can either walk out of here and try not to get killed by this guy, or I can just say, okay, what do you got planned, bud?
Both of them work though, but
It does.
it, and you've got a really good flair for this. So I think that anyone who's trying to figure out how to do the storytelling aspect of DMing would be very benefited by talking to you on that.
And same to you. I mean, you like I'm going to while Zach was talking right after yours. You said you had a very melodic voice, trying to tell these stories, to where stories that you could tell that would be great with anything with the Feywild. You know, if you know somebody is responding to that, you run with it. I know I have been running with villain monologues for a long time, just because people are like, you have the voice to be a villain, you're just only 5'5", you're sorry, bud.
The funny thing about you saying that is whenever I am acting, like I do some things here and there, but for some reason I almost always get typecast as just this completely strange character, or I often used to get typecast as the flirtatious drunk, which is hilarious because that just doesn't fit. But
I mean, it's always the people playing their opposites, right?
I think so, but it's one of those where you never quite know. But thank you for saying that. I always just hear my voice. I'm like, oh God, is that what I sound like? But I think most people are like that with their own voice.
Right.
But,
I mean, me personally, I feel like I speak through my nose unless I change my voice into, doing something different.
well, something else too that people can do whenever they're getting ready to tell stories is if they're nervous about it, practice it. But practice it where you're actually recording yourself and then listen back and think, is that how I would want to hear it? Because there you can figure out details and things you can add. And honestly, it makes the game a lot more fun, at least in my opinion.
Right, right. And if you're wanting to listen to different storytellers, listen to Mercer. The poster child of dungeon master storytelling is Matt Mercer right now. Watch the way he tells a story. If you're wanting to figure out a different way of, oh, I could add this in, or I could say it like this, or I could do one of these things, because I know when I do my accents, I actually sit and I either listen to the person from a different country, or I actually look up different YouTube videos on just people talking. I look at the way their mouth moves, the way the words come out, the trills they put with their R's. It's something you have to almost study almost.
Well, and there's so many different kinds of storytellers to look at. So you mentioned DMing, we mentioned an author earlier, well, a couple authors earlier. There's also music. So like Tom Waits, his voice is so distinct. And I love this diagram that someone did. I think it was actually one of his albums, but just like in his throat, here be demons, I have like gravel in one portion. But a lot of the stories that we listen to, like a lot of really famous songs are ones that actually have a story. They're telling an entire thing. And just try to capture those elements. So, are there occasional rhymes? Is there a limerick pattern that they follow whenever they're speaking? Try to incorporate some of those.
And that is a perfect example that most of the time, escapes a lot of people, is that, songs are stories that are told just with a melodic background. Think of let me think. What's a good one? If you ever know Bobby Darin, old crooner, okay, Mac the Knife. The whole song is about a serial killer stabbing people, and they're trying to figure out who it is. But it's a catchy song.
His life was its own story.
That's totally.
David Bowie, my absolute all-time favorite. So many of his songs tell a story that you're just like, oh, this is great. So there's some that don't quite follow that pattern. Like We Could Be Heroes, it's telling you what we could be, but it's not going through and telling you a story like, Major Tom.
So very true. Thank you for referencing that. Great song.
Thank you guys for doing this and putting on this panel. I know people have been loving it. Do you have any last thoughts before we kick off to our final panel for the evening?
Michelle, anything for you?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for letting me be a part of this. I really enjoyed it, so I appreciate it. I haven't thought about gaming in this aspect in a while, so it's fun.
Right, I'll send you an email. Well, my final thoughts, more of one, don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to act like a dork when you're storytelling, because that's the best thing you can do. And as my character, Arcadius Meadowmere, would say, keep imagining you're the hero of your own story. So if you haven't found your happy ending yet, your story isn't over. And happy casting.
Dang. Now that's a closing.